Before I get into this commentary, I have to give a huge shout out to Cosmo Fury, because in one of the True Crime Sundays that I did, I believe it was the one on Chandra Levy, before he had dropped off of the panel, he had asked me, did I hear about this story? And I'm sitting here saying to myself, no. And one of the things I had asked him was, did this recently happen? And he said yes. And I'm not shocked that, one, I didn't hear about it, and two, I'm not shocked of the outcome in which this story is entailing. So this story is coming out of Albany, New York, where a black man was found hanging from a tree, and already the Albany police have deemed it as a, quote, self-unaliving. So basically what happened was, on June 11th, a black man was found hanging from a tree in Albany, New York, and the police have labeled it as a self-unaliving. You already know what the technical term for it is. But many people, including those claiming to be family members, aren't really convinced that that's exactly what it was. It kind of reminds me of what happened with those twins down there in Georgia. And honestly, given the history of this establishment, the reaction from that actually makes a lot of sense. So what I'm gonna go over now is what we know so far with this story, and what's being questioned, and why it seems like nothing is really coming out of it, or why the story really isn't being floated around. But according to the Time Union, a call was made around 8 a.m. that morning, and officers responded and found a man hanging from a tree on Westerlo Street, which is a mostly residential area in Albany, New York. They say that the man hasn't been officially named by police, but according to a GoFundMe that was put up there, and also several other social media posts, he has been identified as Earl Smith. And this is a statement that actually has come from the Albany police. It says, based on preliminary investigation, the circumstances appear to be consistent with a self-unaliving, and no evidence suggests that the incident is criminal in nature. But a lot of people, several people, in fact, especially many black residents in Albany, aren't buying that explanation, as they shouldn't. So quickly, and let's be honest with ourselves here. Whenever a black man is found hanging from a tree in this establishment, and it doesn't matter what state it's in, the very first thought for a lot of people isn't that he took himself out. The thing that's going to come to mind for them is that it was most likely a lynching of some sort. And for many people, that's not seen as a paranoia or maybe a conspiracy. That's just historical memory. What's also adding to the skepticism is how little that this story has been covered. Locals have gone to TikTok and on Instagram to voice out their frustration. Many are asking, why hasn't this made headlines? Why aren't we learning more from the community members, from the official sources? One person on TikTok who lives and works in the area has stated as saying, I haven't heard a single thing about this until now. How is nobody saying anything? And this is a person who lives in the area, and they haven't heard much of anything about it. So if a person who lives in the area doesn't know much about it, then how are people who are outside of the area going to find out? That's why it caught me off guard when I first learned about it. The silence, the lack of urgency, that's, I believe, is what's part of making people suspicious of the entire thing. Because let's be real with ourselves here. If it was a PC man that they was found hanging from a tree in a major city, okay, this is Albany, New York. For those who don't know their geographical surroundings, Albany is the capital of New York. So this should have definitely made or been on front page news within hours of it happening. But when it's a black man, there's this quietness. It's a real silence that just kind of goes over the room. And that quiet says a lot. And as a matter of fact, it can stay as quiet as long as they want it to be silent. Another issue I think people are having with this is, where's the footage? Allegedly, there's some footage out there, but or if there is no footage, where is it? There has to be something out there that says, okay, we can see what happened here. And if this is a public area, someone had to have seen something. This is 2025 at the end of the day, and cities are covered in cameras, traffic cameras, business security cameras, doorbell, ring footage, all of that. Think about it. When Jonathan Majors was on trial, which ironically was in New York, we saw full footage of an altercation spread across several angles in city blocks. So why can't we see what happened to Earl Smith? There are also rumors that police haven't reviewed all the cameras in the area, or they're choosing not to release what they've seen. And if that is indeed true, that's deeply concerning. And in cases like this, transparency is everything. The public deserves to know what really happened, not just what officials decide is, quote, convenient to share. And also, sadly, this isn't the first time something like this has happened. In 2023, if y'all remember, there was a person named Javion McGee who was found hanging from a tree in North Carolina, and police called it a self-unaliving, but his family too was also suspicious. And they said he had just bought a utility rope at Walmart, sure, but they still hired a private investigator and had an independent medical examiner because the case just didn't sit right with not only the family, but the locals that just happened to be there. And then also a few years before that, back in 2020, there was a black man by the name of Vaughn Booker, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, who was nearly lynched by a group of white men during a 4th of July celebration in Indiana. And if you know the story about Indiana, you already know how they get down. And then it's crazy I'm talking about Indiana because I just did a story about a black man that practically got jumped at a bar by a racist white biker gang out there near Fort Wayne. And that case also took strange and legal turns. And what I mean by that is because there were charges that were filed, then the charges ended up being dropped and then handled through restorative justice. And then what's crazy about it, he ended up being charged alongside with the men that attacked him. So it's like he gets attacked and they still found a way to try to find him guilty of something that was happening to him. So when people hear the words self-unaliving, and I'm just using that because, YouTube friendly and all of that stuff, and they see a black body hanging from a tree, it's not just trauma. It's what we call pattern recognition because it's happened before. And unfortunately, it will happen again if it's not discussed enough. And we also have to talk about the broader political climate that we're currently in, because while America loves to say that lynchings are a thing of the past, the truth about the matter is the attitude that justified lynching never left. It's still very much here, baked into our institutions and echoed through policy. And from, such as the attacks, even though we don't benefit from it, when they do the whole DEI thing, we know we don't benefit from the most, but they love to use that as code speak when it comes to us. Also to white nationalist rhetoric coming from people in actual government positions, like such as Pentagon spokesperson Kingsley Wilson parroting great replacement theory all over social media. White supremacy isn't just surviving, it's actually thriving in plain sight. In fact, hate groups are actually declining in number, and you're probably saying to yourself, Torian, how is that possible? Well, the reason I say that is because, think about it, most white supremacist groups, especially back in the day, thrived in the shadows when it wasn't so mainstream. And now that they're all pretty much mainstream and all over the place and pretty much in your face, that's why now they're starting to decline, because some of them are trying to hide that they're a part of these organizations, and they're trying not to lose maybe any finances or any type of endorsements. They were better off being low key, but now that everything is posted everywhere, especially on social media, and if you want to limit it down to a particular platform, Twitter/X, that's a perfect example of that. Because their beliefs have become, again, like I said, mainstream. When your ideology is plastered all over the place, especially on the news or even in Congress, and something that's guiding policy, at this point, you got to ask the question, do I still need to own, let alone wear this hood, or can I just burn it? Because it's no point. So in closing, I say this. Where does that leave us with Earl Smith? Because we don't know the full truth of this, and the thing is, with them trying to do the whole saying he took himself out, that's their way of having what you call a grand opening and a grand closing case. Because if you just close it off with that and you get enough people to believe it or to not know about it or just flat out not care, then they can just move on to the next thing. And we're not here to speculate recklessly, but I think with the amount of frustration and the fear and the distrust that many people in the black collective are expressing or have when it comes to things like this, even outside of this story, I would say that it's real and it's also earned. Because when black death is met with silence and families have to go begging for answers, and when people are forced to become investigators themselves just to feel heard, that's not only what you see as just a tragedy, but that's just a failure of the system. But honestly, I would just say that that's just the system working in the way that the system has always worked, especially when it comes to black people. That's why it's called white supremacy. And we all, at the end of the day, I would say we all deserve, especially Earl Smith's family, definitely deserve to know what really happened. At the very least, his family. At the very most, honestly, his family. And until we do, then people are going to keep asking all of those questions. And honestly, they should. But that's going to bring this commentary to a close. Y'all let me know what y'all think about this down in the comments, and I will talk to you in the next one.